I'm going to ask Amy to come up and talk a little bit about perspectives. Here's the perspectives reader. I'm so excited about it. Great stuff in here. You don't have to read the whole book, by the way. Tell us about perspectives and what's happening.
Okay. I'm Amy, and I'm the area team coordinator for the Perspectives class here in Marion County. Perspectives, if you haven't, who has heard of Perspectives? I know a couple of y'all have. All right. Wow, good group. So Perspectives is, we like to describe it as a global discipleship course. It helps you dive into God's Word and look at His Word from biblical, historical, cultural, and strategic standpoint on how to reach the nations. That is what we're called to do. That is His purpose, His plan, His mandate for His people. And this course helps you to better understand that, helps you to better understand Genesis to Revelation, what God meant about being on mission and reaching the world and making disciples of the nations. So we also, the historical, what has He done in the past to reach the nations? What does it mean now for us based on that historical aspect? Then cultural. What does it look like to make disciples in a culturally relevant way? We're Westerners. We don't think and process and look at God's Word and who God is and who Jesus is the same way as other cultures do. And then strategically, boots on the ground, how do you make this happen? How do you make this happen here locally? How do you make it happen nationally and then internationally? So there's information on your tables. There's an invite card, which is a 3x5 card there. There's information on the back about the Perspectives class, where it is located, what time College Road Baptist Church is hosting this year. We have coupons that are on the table, which means that you get to come to orientation night. You get to hear more about what Perspectives is about, what you'll learn in this 15-week course. You'll be able to come to lesson 1 and lesson 2. You'll hear the instructors for lesson 1 and lesson 2. Be able to look at the reader online. You'll have stuff to read in here, and there's a workbook, and that stuff will be available online, and there's no cost to you to come and do those 3 nights and see if this is something that you would like to do. It was hosted last year right here. Mark and Jackie were a huge help in hosting last year, and invited Alan to come from College Road, and he kind of got the bug and said, yes, we need to do this at College Road Baptist, so I'm excited to have him on board. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with Darren Gaddis, First Baptist Church, which is where I go. Darren is our lesson 1 instructor. And so we try to get our area pastors involved. Mark is also going to be instructing for us this year.
Lesson 13.
Lesson 13, yes, it's spontaneous multiplication. Mm-hmm. All right, so he is joining us on our instructor team this year. We, instead of having 15 instructors, we have 14. So as you read the material or look at it online, when it says 15 different instructors, we will only have 14.
Because we combined 2 sessions.
Yes, we combined lessons 7 and 8. So anyway, if you have questions, Jackie, Mark, myself can answer them. My contact information is on the invite card and the flyer. So just reach out to us if you'd like to know anything else. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Amy. All right, and Asher's going to come and talk to us about how to reach Gen Z. And somebody earlier said, I'm glad we have a Gen Z guy telling us how to reach Gen Z instead of an old person. So, yeah. Asher and I, we were talking about, we've known each other for 4 years?
Yes.
We've known each other for 4 years?
Yes.
And we knew each other quite a while before we actually met face to face.
Yes. Yes.
We were introduced by a mutual friend, and so we met a lot over Zoom, especially during the pandemic era and all of that. Yes. Anyway, but we had him here. It was just about a year ago, almost a year ago today. I think it was November 2nd
or 3rd.
Yep. So we had him here last year, and to talk about more of the technology side, and he's going to talk a little bit about that today, but mostly about reaching Gen Z. So I'm going to let him tell you what he's going to talk about instead of me telling him.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming so much.
Absolutely. Before I jump in, I just have to say this. Mark and I have now known each other for about 4 years, and y'all are very lucky to have him in your backyard as your association director. There are, there's a lot of talk, especially as somebody in my position as a parachurch person, of what a good ministry partner is, whether that's on the church side or another parachurch side, another contractor, B2B kind of conversation. And Mark is exceptional. One of the best partners, I think, if not, that I know. He just does things really well. He loves people incredibly well. And it's been an incredible privilege, not just to have his support as my ministry and business was, starting up, but also to just kind of, whether he knows it or not, to invest in him and to really be vested in his success and his happiness. He loves you guys so much. Every time I call him, he's just like, I love it here. I love my pastors. I love being able to serve these people. And I love Marion County. And so before I jump in with my fire hose of stuff, could we shower him with a little bit of applause for his work? Thank you, Mark. So, like I just said, I have a fire hose of information. If you have a notepad, I would recommend it. It's going to be exhausted by the end of this. I'm actually going to be talking about two different things. I'm going to be talking about Generation Z, and I'm also going to be talking about de-churched populations and de-churched people. There's a lot in common between these two specific demographics. You're going to be surprised by that, just like I was a little bit earlier this year. The de-churched information actually comes from just down the road in Orlando. 2 researchers and pastors down in Orlando did all of this incredible stuff. They are featured in the New York Times, the Atlantic. It's really quite groundbreaking work. It's in your backyard, and I'm excited to be able to take some of their work and just present the overview of all of that. A little bit about me. I live in Franklin, Tennessee. Good Green Creative is a digital communications company for churches. So we partner exclusively with churches and parachurch organizations to really help them utilize the internet to spread the gospel. That is what our goal is. Even more broadly speaking, my whole mission is to close the communications gap. So really trying to work with churches and organizations to make sure that they can get the communications and marketing services that they need so that they can do all of that. Instead of having to hire a full-time person for maybe $85,000 on a living wage, if you're talking about that, I'd maybe charge a substantially lower rate to get the same services. So that was really kind of my call into that, and just a little bit about me. So today's itinerary, we're going to be looking first at Generation Z, profile views, current impact trends, roles, opportunities for the church, and some of my recommendations. And then we're going to go into de-churched America, which is really going to be the 5 types of de-churched people and what we can do to win them back. So a couple of other things I just want to note here, as far as my credibility is concerned. I can talk a lot about the digital media stuff, but I'm also going to be talking a lot about not just digital ministry, but practical ministry. These are going to be some, you might consider them hot takes real quick. These are just things as a Gen Z that I think would be effective. This is just an additional perspective. It's not prescriptive, if that makes sense on the practical side. These are just some of my commentary. Does that make sense? Cool. Before I jump in real quick on everything else, I'd love to just get everybody's names here, because I think what we're going to probably be doing is we'll kind of take a couple of steps through the presentation, stop, ask questions, have a discussion, and then just keep going. Does that make sense? So I want to be able to address everybody as they would like to be and actually have this be more of like a family-style conversation. Does that sound good to everybody? Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, so then let's start. I'll just point to the different tables, and then we'll play the name game real quick.
David.
Pastor David. Rose.
Sarah.
And Sierra or Sarah?
Sarah.
Sarah. Okay, just like in the Bible. Okay, the middle table over here. Patrick. Adam. Terry. Matt. Good to see y'all. Miss Amy.
Peggy.
Miss Peggy. Yes. I know your name, Mark. Tammy. And then you two gentlemen on the ends.
I'm Jeff.
Pastor Jeff.
I'm Gary.
And Pastor Gary. Yes, sir. And ma'am, what's your name? Jolene. Jolene. Very cool name. Very cool. And remind me, so what church, and then so for the pastors real quick, what churches are y'all representing real quick?
Kendrick.
We're from Oak Griner.
Oak Griner, okay.
Fellowship Baptist.
Fellowship Baptist. Whole table. Cool. The Fellowship Baptist table. Got it.
Plus one.
Yeah. Plus one.
Plus one.
First Baptist Fort McCoy.
Fort McCoy.
And Woodside Baptist.
Woodside. Okay, cool. So I'm not sure if you heard about this, but we are going to be doing a little drawing for a free website redesign for one of your churches at the very end of all of this as well. So I'm very excited to partner with one of you at the end of today as well. Cool. Okay. Okay. You ready? Buckle up. Here we go. Generation Z. So let's just talk about their profile real fast. On the surface level, here's what you need to know. They're born between 95 and 2012. Oh, it just...
I'm right on the tip of that.
What year are you?
95.
95? Yeah, so the thing is that the blur year is anywhere between 95 and 98, and that's a more liberal view. In my opinion, I would consider you more of a millennial if you're born in 95.
Yeah, I'm March 20th, so I'm like right at the edge. So so I usually consider myself like millennial, Gen Z.
Yeah. So. I myself am 97. Most people, more people that go more 1990 through 2014 or 2015. That's a more commonly held range. I myself am 97, but I identify with Gen Z a little bit more, just based on cultural pieces here and there, and even my own consumer behavior as I've analyzed that myself. So, born between 95 and 2012, they're raised by Generation X, and they're really defined by a loose and trusting parenting style. And that comes from the book Instabrain, which is a great book. I have copies of all the books that I actually cite here if you want to take a look at them, hold them, flip through them at the end. And so loose and trusting parenting really comes into play when it regards the internet. So the internet was kind of a new thing. Having a personal computer was a new thing. And so parents were just like, the internet, it's just like a library in your house. This is harmless, right? So people were able to log on, and kids were able to log on and become digital natives in a really, loose and trusting way. And we've seen positive and negative repercussions of that in Gen Z as well, as you'll find out. Lastly, they're driven by and attracted to authenticity and leadership in published content. And that's going to be a main theme, not only for Gen Z, but even for de-churched America. So I want you to just make a note of that. Authenticity in leadership and in published content. Below the surface, they are empathetic, entrepreneurial, digital natives. And so many people are like, okay, if you're young, you lean left politically and culturally and socially. That is not completely true. Empathetic, they're more socially liberal, so you're going to be seeing a little bit more of a acceptance of, LGBTQ and other minorities and other viewpoints and things like that. Not that we agree with that, but that is their stance on it, if that makes sense. They're more open to it, they're more accepting. They're okay with being friends with people that disagree with them. That's really what I'm trying to say there. Entrepreneurial, they are incredibly frugal. They are penny pinchers. They won't really say it, and they won't really act like your typical penny pincher, but they really are. And we're going to get to that in a second. They're fiercely independent. Individualism is a big thing for them. High loyalty and high spending potential. So what I mean, and we're going to get into this as well, but high loyalty meaning when they associate with a brand on a corporate level, when they associate with it, they are high loyalty. So for instance, I myself, as you can see from the back of my computer here, I'm an Apple guy. I got hooked on Apple a long time ago, I think like many of us, but I'm one of those people that used to be like deep in the ecosystem, like phone, watch, all the little accessories, like everything. And so high loyalty and high spending potentials. They also, when they are loyal to a specific type of brand, they will spend money on it. They will speak with their dollars. And it's not just me that's talking about it, but it's also huge potential for your church. Just to let you know that, as far as like, if your church can get into a place where it can position its brand, where it can inspire and win high loyalty from Gen Z, they're also going to have the spending potential to match their loyalty. That's just a fact. And then finally, they're digital natives and they're stingy content aggregators. And so what I mean by that is You seem to laugh at that.
It's like, what does that mean?
A stingy contact aggregator? I'm glad you asked. This is a great segue to my next slide. Thank you. So what I mean by that, they have Gen Z has an attention span on average of 8.6 seconds. If I seem like I have ADD, so does everyone else in my generation. Goldfish, for comparison, have a 9.1 second attention span. So we are losing to bubbles to goldfish.
Wow.
And we have been for a very long time, okay? These are just the facts. I have multiple books that have mentioned this fact. I'm just like, man, everyone's hating on the young. I'm like, my gosh. However, while everyone else says that Generation Z can't hold a thought, these 8-second attention spans act more like 8-second filters, according to James Emery White, who was one of the first church leaders to write anything about Gen Z, non-denom guy. And when Gen Z finds something that they're interested in, meaning they've listened for that 8.6 seconds and are like, that hits. They actually have a tendency, if they really are into it, to do a deep dive for 90 minutes on the subject. So think about what that means for your church. If you say something that hits and is relevant to their life, you may actually have a 90-minute gospel interaction with this person digitally. How many times do you think of a young person having a 90-minute gospel interaction anywhere these days? But that's the opportunity. Funny little story here. I was in my college dorm room and I was reading this information for the first time, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, the 8-second attention span. My parents have said I had ADD. I don't believe it, but squirrel. But I'm like, I'm just gonna test this out. So I went on Instagram and I just was, flipping through some sermon content, hashtag sermons, things like that, just seeing if anything jumped out at me. And so I grew up in Los Angeles, and so one of the preachers there is named Judah Smith. And so whether you like him or not, that was the content that hit with me because he said something that struck a chord. And so I'm like, what did he say? And so then I watched the whole reel maybe another 5 times. I go to his website. I look up the sermon. I listen to the whole sermon. And then I look up as much as I can on that subject and the church itself. And when I looked at the clock, it was exactly an hour and a half later. Does that make sense? This is not just some random stat. This is not an aggregate. I have lived this. And it is definitely possible. And I've seen, and when I was training other people on this a little bit more prominently back during the pandemic, also people who are Gen Z, they're just like, we don't have 8.6 second attention spans. We don't deep dive stuff for 90 minutes. They called me back 2 weeks later and they're just like, Asher, I don't know if that book's a research book or a horror book because it's scary accurate. And they actually had experienced a lot of these things as well. And so I want to hold on this because, stingy content aggregation, you have 8.6 seconds to make an impact in someone's life, to make an impression. That's not a lot of time, but people do it, and there's an art to it, and there's a way we can do it. Go for it.
That goes along with, so I watch stuff on minimalism and
Yes.
Religious stuff like adultery and stuff. And they're talking about on the videos a month or so ago that if you can't just be sitting there in front of in front of your camera talking like you're doing for us. There's got to be all kinds of things happening. You've got to zoom in and zoom out, and you have to have all these little things float up into the screen, and the words go by, and it's more and more each generation, or each little group of kids or people, even adults, have to have all these different things happening.
Right.
So when you have your website or you have a channel or something,
Right.
You can't just be sitting in front of them and chatting. There has to be a lot happening in those few seconds.
Correct. And so for Instagram or for social media, you have 8.6 seconds to make a first impression.
Yeah.
What you're talking about more is what I would call digital broadcast design. So like how you animate your live stream.
Right.
That's not necessarily my area of expertise, but everything you're saying matches up with what I've researched on that subject briefly.
Yeah.
So great connection to...
Our kids won't sit there and watch something. If I go, hey guys, look at this video. If there's not a lot going on, I'm like, look at all this Dave Ramsey stuff. If there's not a lot of people going
Dave
back and
Ramsey's
forth,
my neighbor. Technically. I'm in Franklin, Tennessee.
Right.
Yes,
right, yeah. I mean, they love him. They love all his stuff. But if it's too long, there's got to be other stuff going on.
For
And
sure.
But then we were talking a while ago, he's been here long enough to see our teenagers, but they don't make any sense because literally we start at 6:30 and go to 8. And the way it's set up is they come in at 6:30, they're supposed to be able to hear the, most YouTube departments, you have the music going, we got a pool table, we got all these different things. Not our kids. Our kids walk in the door, they sit down ready to be taught, and I could actually go for the entire hour and a half, and they're still not wanting to leave.
And that goes to
I don't get that. I've never experienced that in my time.
And I think that has to do more with the fact that your practical ministry has probably followed through for those kids in a really impactful way. So I would say, first of all, good job on doing the practical stuff really well, because that kind of brand loyalty is earned. It is not given. Does that make sense? So I commend you for that, and I think that's for sure. But it is an earned thing.
I can kind of attest to this. Being in this right here, when for 6 years I was at a church that was 2 miles from a university.
Yeah.
We had 39 different separate countries represented on that campus.
Where about? I'm just curious. What university?
Harrogate, Tennessee, LMU.
Oh, wow.
But with it was the university called Lincoln Memorial University. The thing is with this right here, specifically with churches, if you don't have something that can catch their eye, if your predominant age group out of your church, and this is for Florida, if your predominant age group out of your church is 60 plus, they're not going to show up. Mm-hmm. Because they don't have anybody around their age that's going to be there.
Right.
And so one of the problems with it is that if they look at the website and it's old, it's outdated, it's not modernized. When you walk into a building and it's not modernized, it's not up to date, it looks like a funeral home, they're not going to, because their attention span is gone.
Right. And I think there's an important distinction that you bring up as far as design aesthetic overall, and then digital, digital saturation and design aesthetic. So digital saturation is much more important for Gen Z than it is for millennials. What you're talking about with design aesthetic is much more important with millennials. So you can have two different, how does this metaphor go here real quick? You can have Gen Z come in and you can have millennials come in. You can ask them, how was the church? And how is your service on any given Sunday? The Gen Z person is going to talk about how the tone of the preacher, the relevance of the message, and how they felt from it based on if it's actually true or authentic, which is what we're going to be getting to a little bit more in this conversation. The millennials are going to talk about the lights, production, all the other little production details and the aesthetics. They're going to have notes on your branding that you didn't know could exist. And so that's, I think, an important distinction here, where you have millennials are more aesthetic driven, whereas Gen Z is really much more practical in my experience and in my research, as we're going to talk. But I appreciate your points on all of that as well. That's a phenomenal point.
And so and I think one of the problems is, specifically with churches today in general, is that we don't do that. We think that we're still in the 40s when churches was the center of the community. It's not that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you're not to interrupt you or anything, but you're speaking my language. Why do you think I do what I do?
Yes.
I mean, my whole goal is to help churches get digitally savvy so that they can actually embrace and connect with the people where they're at.
And it's not compromise.
No. Having a digital channel is not a compromise in any sense of the word. It's just adding to your ministry. That's it. I don't know if there's ever been a time when a website forced someone to, compromise on a core doctrinal belief, I've never heard of it, if that makes sense. Because it's just a channel. Just like your cork board, or your bulletin. It's just another channel. It's just another way. It's another plate that you can put content on. Does that make sense? And that's all it is.
You're ringing bells with me because I'm discipling 3 guys one-on-one. They're all in their early 20s, so they were all born around 2000.
Yeah.
They went on our website and listened to me preach a number of times before coming to church, and then showed up with 20 questions on their phone they wanted to ask me. And as we're going through discipleship, they use the word doctrine more than my generation did.
Yeah.
Because they talk about how this fits into what they are seeing doctrinally. And
Yeah, and that is, you're getting ahead of me on my presentation a little bit. No, you're good.
That sounds like
But
our
there's
kids.
there's an incredible point that he's that's kind of rising to the surface organically right now. But it's about, how is your doctrine lived out?
Yeah.
How, like,
my generation talked about what we believe.
yeah,
These guys use the word doctrine with me.
Yeah.
And they usually go and listen to somebody on YouTube, another preacher on the subject that we're on.
yeah, and the thing is this: if you're really wanting to reach Gen Z, there's a communications part of it that is a huge part of the first impression that I help with, that I'm skilled in. But what I've also found, and what you're going to see not only in Gen Z, but even in De-Churched America, how your doctrine is actually fleshed out in your praxis is everything. Like that is your testimony. That is your witness. That is maybe, dare I say, maybe 80 to 85% of the solution that I'll be presenting today on the practical level. So we've had a great discussion here. Are there any other questions? Because we still have a good chunk of slides to go. Go. Cool. Let's go. Okay, let's look at their views. Okay? Gen Z, in case we forgot who we were talking about, is distinctly post-Christian, and most people consider them spiritually illiterate. And I include kind of this harsher term here because this was more of the earlier way of looking at it. I think as we all saw earlier this year at Asbury, you may have some spiritually illiterate people, but they are spiritually hungry people. And so I think the illiterate part is, I think it's an odd put down because it's also a really unique opportunity because post-Christian is only a few years away from being pre-Christian again, which is an incredible opportunity for us. And if you're looking at movements over in England where they have been post-Christian for a number of decades, they are now kind of in this cultural moment where most people are saying, okay, we're kind of in a pre-Christian moment again. And there are rumblings of incredible revival within the Anglican Church. So if you want to go research that, I'd highly recommend it. So distinctly post-Christian, spiritually illiterate, career-driven, financially conscious savers, more conservative, but they're also socially empathetic to all walks of life. Do we have any questions on this? I know it's treading over a little bit of ground there, but yes.
Can you just specify, so like, are we talking about Gen Z as in brought up in American culture?
Yes,
This
in
would not
American
be-
culture. This is American
Okay.
culture for the most part. There are some parts of this that also touch on the global context as well, but most of this was done by research out of Virginia, at William and Mary College, really looking at American Gen Z. But there's a lot of tendencies that also transcend international borders as well, here and there. Just standard consumer behavior research.
Are we going to have a copy of this presentation?
I'll
Jackie's got it.
be touching on where that will be
Okay,
available.
that's okay.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Okay.
That's not about it.
We're having fun. We're having fun. I know we're all drinking from a fire hose here. We're all doing good?
Yes.
Good. So these are the views on the church, and this is from Barna's book, Gen Z, Volume 1. The problem with evil is a barrier to faith for 33% of Gen Z. So if you want to really talk to a portion of that population that feels further from the faith, talk about evil. Talk about the problem. Talk about how it is allowed to exist philosophically. All of those things. Like, they're really tough questions. I'm just saying that's a huge opportunity to reach people. I'm not saying it's going to be immediately successful. That really depends on how you do it. But that's a bucket. 1 in 4 believe that the Bible and science are complementary, which means 75% really don't hold that view. They see that science and faith contradict each other or don't necessarily mesh the way they need to. So, standard apologetics touch on that. Tough issues these days, but there's an opportunity there. 3 in 5 Christians that are Gen Z that don't go to church say they find God elsewhere, which means we have maybe an institutional problem, perhaps, in that regard. At least in my research, that's the question that came up to mind. And then finally, 1 in 4 teens choose a negative judgmental image to represent the church. And so I want to describe this to you. So they have like an array of pictures in the book. I think I can pull out the book. But essentially it's like stuff you associate with church, like pews, community, things, and then there's one where there's a Bible in the guy's hand and a finger pointing like this.
Yeah.
And that is the one that 25% of Gen Z chose. If that doesn't sum up the PR crisis we're in, I don't know what does. But this is kind of our starting block. And there's a lot more opportunity I'm going to get. This has a happy ending for sure, but we need to get with the idea that this is where we're coming from, for the most part in Gen Z. Okay, so that's kind of the basics. Do we have any other questions on the basics before we get to the current trends? Let's go. Here's the current impact of Gen Z. Gen Z accounts for 25% of all people on the planet right now. They are fueling the renewed energy for movements advocating for social change. We saw this in the summer of 2020 with the Black Lives Matter movement. We also are seeing this right now with with some of the war commentary that's going on, whether you agree with that or not. It's just nuts, but it proves the point that this is where they're putting their energy. They want social change, which I think should be, whether we agree with where the energy is right now, we should agree that social change is something that we're also interested in. So if we can channel that to the church, that's going to be a positive change in this generation. The other thing is this: they have $44 billion in direct buying power as a generation. And it is, I think it's like something like 20 to 30% larger than millennials' buying power in comparison. So it's just, they're big, they're powerful, and they're active. That's what I want you to take away from this slide. So these are words that describe Generation Z so far. We've brought this up. Content aggregators. They're specific, discerning, investigative, judgmental, uninspired, lonely, culturally involved, time-obsessed, locally, socially liberal, financially conscious. They crave authenticity, and they can be loyal. Did I miss any of them from up there? We want this pipeline. We want to address their loneliness, and we want to shift that into loyalty to the church. That's what we want to do. That's the pipeline. We want to take one of these, we want to eliminate it, and we want to emphasize another one. But how are we going to do that? Inspired, quick, specific, culturally involved, authentic content. That's the silver bullet here. You don't have to change doctrine. You just have to create inspired, quick, specific, culturally involved, authentic content. And this is why digital communications is so important, because this is the place where we host that inspired, quick, specific, culturally involved, authentic content.
Good question on that.
Yeah.
On the loneliness part. What makes them lonely? What makes Gen Z lonely?
Well,
it seems like they're a large group.
They're a large group.
But do they not even band with each other?
So you have pandemic norms that set in. You also have the fact that they're digital natives. And as research continues to come out, the more that you are engrossed on your phone, the lonelier you become. They actually say that social media is possibly the drug with the side effect of loneliness. And so there are some really healthy conversations going on as far as like cause and effect and why. If you look in the book Instabrain, they cite also that the decline in church attendance for this specific generation also is a major contributing factor to their loneliness. Because previous generations went to church and didn't have as high of suicide, mental health, loneliness levels. Gen Z, being post-Christian and de-churching, are seeing all of those numbers exacerbate at an alarming rate on a continual basis. Like even right now, those numbers are not trending in the right direction as we speak. Does that help? Yeah. It's really the digital native part. And I'll even say this, I would say, as I've discerned my role as a digital church communicator, it's not about getting people to engage the gospel online. That's the first part. It's about convincing them that they need to engage the gospel offline.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be able to convince the people online to engage it offline unless you talk to them online. We have to go to them. It's a mission field. It's a digital quagmire. It's digital Main Street. We have to go there. Facebook, social media, they're all popular places where people hang out. It's no different if we go to the farmer's market and start handing out Bibles. Makes sense?
I think acceptance is a big part.
It is.
Since they are culturally accepting, they want to feel accepted.
They want to receive what they give.
Exactly. And that authenticity plays into that in a really big way.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot be authentic in front of them. They will continue to be lonely because they don't want to have anything to do with you.
Yes. Mark, you and I talked about a long time ago about the BS meter on Gen Z being incredibly reactive and sensitive. Like if you are inauthentic to a Gen Z in any way, that is worse than a hit campaign against your church.
Mm-hmm.
I know I have been in many conversations with pastors that I've tried to connect with, not just for, hey, you want to work with me, good, great, creative, just like finding my community. There have been many moments where it's just like, oh, it's like that's kind of inauthentic, paltering, or condescending, demeaning, and I'm just like, okay, you're not for me. I'm out. I may have loved the preaching, the sermon, all the stuff, and I've been like, next, thank you, next, politely.
But it's not necessarily BS, if you want to put it. It's because they've already gotten someone's interpretation. They've already gotten somebody's thoughts in the matter.
Someone being
online, just some guy who
an opinion on. I'm just trying to clarify your
so one
statement.
thing like it says a theological debate.
Yeah, theological debate.
And you have this side where you believe is Jesus God? Okay, let's just look at that one. And you say yes, and here's my proof. But they've already heard somebody who relates to them, who already knows that, talks their language, but because he disagrees with that statement, they see yours as BS.
So I don't think it's a doctrinal thing, and I don't think it's an informed thing. I think it's a tone thing. It is a matter of making space for people. This is just coming from my own personal experience with my friends, even some really colorful ones back out from my time in LA. And I just was like, would you ever talk to a pastor? No, you're all good. Would you ever talk to a pastor? Many of the times, they are not opposed to being friends or engaging with a pastor. Now, they have viewpoints that they don't want to be condemned on right off the bat, and that's an issue. But how do we love people into who they're meant to be without condemning them is, I think, the question and the strategy and the pit for the church. Jesus would ask incredibly pointed questions to kind of imply, are you sure you have this right? We all talk about, the woman that was brought before and cast the first stone and everybody leaves and things like that. And so Jesus, probably gained a follower in that woman by not condemning her. It didn't dismiss or condone the sin that she was caught in, but he refused to use condemnation because the day of the Lord is coming later, not right now. This is the season of the year of Jubilee and things like that. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of theological things, and I don't have a degree in theology. I just hang out with pastors a lot, Zoom with them. So I may have picked up a couple of things, but that's my view. It's not about whether they're informed by one thing or another. Really, Gen Z wants space. If you are patient, kind, and open to having the discussion, even if you will never compromise on that specific doctrine or belief, the fact that you created that space and just wanted to be in the same room as them will go so much farther in being a convincing point to your argument than anything you could say that's academic or theologically, doctrinally correct.
But that goes back to the brand loyalty. Because once you've won them, you may have something that they don't agree with, that they're not in line with.
Yeah.
But you've already won them, and somebody else can bring up that same thing, and they'll be kind of harsh towards that other person, but you have the same viewpoint, and they're not like that towards you.
Yeah.
Because you've already shown them that our generation is the same way. It comes in a different package.
No, for sure. And really, it's if you are convicted on the things that you really believe, and you're upfront about that, they appreciate that. We appreciate that. But if you also are open to holding space for conversations with people you don't agree with, listening to questions, and being open to answering them as the informed opinion, if you're just literally sitting in a chair across from somebody having an espresso, does more ministry than having a 500-page essay on why you're right and trying to win the argument. Because to win the person, all you have to do is invite them to sit across from you.
Right.
And if we're talking about loneliness, what is the cure to loneliness in this regard? Inviting people to sit across from you.
Is their loneliness often without irrational?
I'm not as informed to necessarily say why or how irrational it is. I do know that there is a connection between digital usage and the exacerbating emotions, and the fact that their content aggregators and digital natives makes them prone to that. Does that make sense?
My granddaughter's
Yeah.
in that category, and she was going through depression, and I didn't understand why she would feel lonely. In fact, she came here for 6 months, once a week for counseling.
Yeah.
Right here in this building. Her favorite song was that God only knows what
Yeah,
you're going
for
through.
King and Country, yeah.
God only knows what
Yeah,
they
they're
say
also from
about you.
Nashville, yeah.
But I never saw the rationality. Why?
Yeah. And I think it's not about like getting the answer from them as to why. And it's not about suggesting what their doctrine should be. I think it's about emphasizing the fact that it's like you're a human in progress.
Yeah.
God loves you. And whether we disagree on this or not, it's like, I want to see you get to heaven, so I'm going to do my part to get you there. If more pastors and churches took that posture for the younger generation, you don't have to agree with them, and you can call them out if they do something flagrant. But as they're exploring, I mean, I know that I probably have a bunch of doctrine stuff that I'm probably like maybe not completely correct on, but I'm not going to know that until I'm sitting across the table from somebody having a conversation. And I'm not going to be willing to change my view or my opinion or my belief on that until I know that person has my best interest in mind as well.
Mhm.
So there's a rapport thing. I'd love to stay on this, but we still have like half a presentation to go. Are we good to move on with this? This is such an important pipeline. If we can get them from lonely to loyal through specific culturally involved content, and I think I'm just going to add this because this is a consult piece that I give to every pastor, blog. Write, speak to your cultural moment, not only in your city, not only your community, but your city, your county, and even your state and your nation. Because one thing I think that I'm always so surprised on is pastors are like, pastoral commentary and the pastoral voice is in no demand right now. I'm like, there's an oversupply of sermons. There's a lot of people doing that, and we need that. That oversupply is always going to be an undersupply by our standards as Christians. That's a core belief. But your ability to comment on culture as it's happening through a blog like that, that's in short supply, and people want them. There have been many moments like after the Jacksonville shooting, after the Nashville shooting, after many different crises that our nation, Uvalde, different shootings, different crises that have happened throughout our country in the last couple of years. I go to my pastors and I'm just like, you should write a blog on this because people are messed up by seeing another one of these on the news. And those are some of the highest traffic moments I facilitate on people's websites, is by saying, you as a pastor need to talk about this. It'll be a big opportunity. They talk about it, there's traffic, more people come to their church because they're like, I like the way you talked about this crisis. It helped me through it myself, watching it on the news.
I have 1 minute to move on. I think really something that comes along with this when you talk about authenticity is also intentionality.
Yes, and those two are inextricably linked.
Because the difference in you can have a website, but if you're not intentional with that website and showing it and explaining stuff like that, if your website looks like somebody threw it together, about a 5-year-old threw it together, and it's not going to do anything if you have 6 different places that you got to click on to get to one thing, it's not going to reach them.
Right. I also think, it's Adam, right?
Yeah.
You're definitely a millennial.
Wouldn't take that.
But the other thing I would say is this. This is also, to your point, this is the reason why succinct and intentional branding for a church is a game changer. I was working with the Presbyterian church just down the street from where I live, local, and the pastor and I, Presbyterians process a lot through their sessions and things like that. And so being able to say, hey, could we maybe refine your language was maybe no exaggeration, an 18-month ask, just for that small little thing. So session approves it, and we jump into this process for a month. Well, what we found is that most of their language was there. They just needed to clean it up real quick, and then we needed to change their motto from this thing about who they are to what they do. And so it was the small church. It was the small church with a big heart was their old motto, and their current motto, I think, is discover, worship, grow, and share. So when they jump onto the website, what are the first 4 words you see? You're going to discover, worship, grow, and share God. And how are you going to do that? Well, that's the rest of the website.
And I think that's one of the things that we got to move on, but is that so many things, you have this vision statement on a website, but it's 4 lines about what the church is. And then you go into the website and there's nothing about what the church is.
What they're doing, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
so,
there's no proof of concept there.
Exactly. So I gave an example earlier. I was sending out resumes to churches right now, and a church that sent my resume out to had nothing about the staff on it at all. There was nobody.
That's typical, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. And so the problem was if a young family is looking to go to church, get in church and stuff like that, then what happens is if you have nobody about the staff, there wasn't even a statement from the pastor on it. And so when that happens right there, there's nothing.
Yep.
You don't know anybody.
Yep. You guys are getting all the little extra nuggets today. There's a key difference between a mission statement and a vision statement. A mission statement says what you're doing. A vision statement says who you want to become and what you want to see your city become. If you want to have a great mission statement, say how you want to achieve gospel growth. If you want to talk about a vision statement, talk about what gospel growth looks like when it's fully actualized. Give people something that they can join and give people a goal that they can aspire to. And if you can actually do both of those things, then you have a really compelling website. People are going to be like, hey, what's this? What are these people up to? You might get them on your site for 90 minutes.
What did you say vision was again?
Vision statement is a statement about what gospel growth looks like when it's fully actualized in your city, in your church, and all that other stuff. So mission statement is identifying the process of how you're doing it. Vision is what the finished product would look like. So a vision statement would start out something like, we hope, we pray our city becomes this. A mission statement says, we are a church that does this. Most people mix those up or they don't know what those are, but those are the key differences there. And they're very important to mind your P's and Q's in that regard. Okay. So if you thought the rest of this was a fire hose, this is the part where it really becomes a fire hose, and this is still just the first half of the presentation. So I'm going to go over 12 rules for engaging Gen Z. We're going to try and fly through these. If we need to talk through them, we can. But this is, I'm going to get as much out of this as you can. Interrupt me if you need to, or ask a question, whatever you want to do. You ready? Rules 1 and 2, spark inspiration, incorporate learning. Provoke wonder, which is to say provoke the sense of newness and awe in whatever you do. Incorporate learning, entertain curiosity, answer questions, and really seek to equip people intellectually. Does that make sense? As far as like what you're doing, how you're doing it, there's a goal and there's a tactic. Because Gen Z wants to be provoked to wonder. They're kind of uninspired. They want to be inspired. Do that in your first 8 seconds. Incorporate learning. They want to know something new. They're voracious. as far as wanting to know something that they don't know. Teach them something. Give them a point. Say that life doesn't have to be this way and why. That's actually a really good one. I should write that one down. Rules 3. Do you have any questions on this? Is that good? Cool. 3 and 4. Connect with people and build communities everywhere. So, connecting with people. Be present and responsive on social media. Frequently update the website. I would even go so far as to say if you can answer your emails personally on the pastoral level from time to time, that goes a very long way with Gen Z. Not being handed off to a secretary or an associate or something like that, as a conversation that can be delegated. If they email you, if they find your email and they want to email you or something like that, talk to them. They reached out to you. Honor that. Build communities everywhere, online and offline. Use the platform as a place to engage the people the same way you would use a sanctuary. So I often call your website or your media tab, your blog, your resources tab, the digital pulpit. You can say anything from there. If there's stuff from your sermon that ends up on the cutting room floor that you're like, man, we should have talked about that, but it needed to be 35 minutes. Take all of that stuff from the cutting room floor, make a blog post out of it, and still get it out there. God put it on your heart. It just may not have been the right thing for Sunday. It can be the right thing for Monday. Does that make sense, y'all? Cool. Rule number 5, quality content. Make it look on brand and good. Brand consistency, incredibly important. Make it look good. Have it be like make the investment in a camera. Make the investment in having a photographer that knows what they're doing, take pictures. Little details like that will have a major return on investment. Number 6, be the hustle. So don't just say and entertain and give things for them to learn. Be the place where they can channel their energy, is what I'm trying to say. Give specific, well thought out call to actions to community-specific initiatives that people can jump into and take ownership of. So if your church does a feeding the homeless ministry or something like that, say, hey, not just, hey, we need volunteers to do this, but it's like, hey, we need a volunteer coordinator for this specific ministry. Remember, they're entrepreneurial. If they can start like a pseudo, homeless ministry or something else out of, the incubation of your church, that's going to mean a lot to them. If that issue means a lot to them and they're able to say, hey, this is the ministry of my church in this specific direction, give them that opportunity. It's like they may not have a management degree, but they may know how to address the issue better than you. And they might be able to inform you and your church on how to come alongside different things in your community. And they're going to bring a lot more to the table than you would maybe expect. So you do have to temper that a little bit. I know I myself did a lot of initiatives and things out of my home church growing up. But I was always so grateful for the fact that I could be like, hey, church, could I use your branding but then do this thing? And they're just like, yeah. They were very open about that, and they had quite the brand. So anyway, does that all make sense as far as being the hustle? Give people some ownership. Allow them, basically try and communicate, hey, this is a place where you can channel that social change desire that you and your generation have. We want to come alongside that. We don't know how to. How can we help? Have the conversations, but be open to it. Number 7, I mentioned this a little earlier. Stand for something. Look at stories and ideas unfolding throughout the world and speak directly into each of them. Pastoral commentary, incredibly powerful. The idea that you stand for something in this culture is something that's actually attractive to Gen Z, whether you believe that or not. If I was, for instance, I'm just trying to set up the scene here real quick to give a good example. I'm a very, just full disclosure, more, I'm pretty middle of the road, moderate. I have some political right leanings, and there's some stuff on the left, specifically in some of the environmental pieces that I think is worth noting. In Gen Z, unless you are kind of a firebrand to some extent, and your tone is not creating space and is disrespectful, you can have somebody like me sit across the table from one of my friends who's is lesbian, out in LA, bi, lesbian, kind of does whatever she wants to do. And there's the affirmation of the fact that we're morally different, but there's also the fact that, yes, you're a human and you're a human. Kind of that whole postmodern culture of live your truth, but it's also the matter of, for Christians, it's a matter of like, Imago Dei. I don't agree with how you're stewarding that, but you still have it. So I have to respect that. Does that make sense? So when you stand for something, you don't have to compromise on your values. In fact, don't. But just know, it's like as you're talking with other people, Gen Z stands for what they believe in very strongly, and they respect people that take a strong stance on what they believe in. And they're okay with disagreement a lot more than what you would probably recognize, at least in my own experience. Okay, rule number 8, create seamless personalized experiences. Use all the tools possible to create a personal experience that complements and supports your ministry. Make social media and your email as familiar as Sunday service. This is just essentially another note on brand consistency. We're going to move on. 9 and 10, support buy-in at every step. Every social media post, every blog post, invite people into your story. Have a call to action. Any post that you send out that doesn't have a call to action is a wasted post. I think my view of this, there's so many churches that have asked me, like, hey, could we have like these conversation starters on our Instagram, like little interrupt your feed kind of thing, get the comments going. I take the hot take that those are kind of wasteful because it drives engagement, which is great for your profile, but it does nothing as far as, hey, like, there's a way you can change the world today. There's a way you can join the church today. There's a way you can follow Jesus better today. And we're creating that opportunity. We're creating space for you to do that. Does that make sense? So that's what supporting buy-in at every step means. Making it fun. Simple note. Why would anyone go to a non-fun church? You can have doctrine, but it's like, but I know for me, it's like when I go to church, I don't just go because of the sermon and the worship and everything else. I go because my friends are there. I go because they put on events. Maybe they throw a concert. They have an open mic night. There's different events and programming that you can do that's going to actually make church a community thing again, not just a religious thing. Does that make sense? Both are very important. Don't want to dismiss either of them. These last 2 rules are a couple of my rules that I'm adding to Instabrain stuff. Number 11, know your audience. Read up and explore who Gen Z is. Do your own research. And go from the pulpit, have like some note in a sermon at some point that says, hey, we're reading up on this and we're trying to listen. Because the second they say that, you're going to get a lot of engagement from people that identify as Gen Z and are in Gen Z, and they're going to be like, oh, you're trying to listen. Let me talk to you. That happens all the time. Pastors are surprised when they take this piece of advice and then they get the engagement. They're just like, oh, you want to listen? I'm going to talk. It's not going to be invited. You're going to be like, I didn't want to do research, like first-person research, but you're going to get it if you say that. And again, that's an incredible opportunity for all of us to create space for them to listen and to begin having gospel conversations with them. Okay, we ready? Rule number 11. Be authentic, and this is the really big one. None of the rules recommended here work unless your church is following them true to your brand, mission, and heart. You might be, all of us in here are Baptist, but how is Woodside Baptist in your mission and vision? How does that inform the way that you're going to do it? What's your flavor? What's your spin on it? Kendrick Baptist, how's that going to change? How's the fact that it's Kendrick Baptist doing it change your spin on it? These are all missional conversations here. Because the way that all of our different churches work is actually kind of a marketing campaign for God to reach a specific type of person in our community. We need to remember that. We're not going to be able to win everybody, but together we can, individually as well, and as a collective. Finally, follow through is the love language of Gen Z. They'll follow through for your church and call to actions if you follow through on your words, stances, and communications. You say something, do it. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Follow through is the proof of concept for conviction. Faith without deeds is dead. Doctrine without practice is... Thank you for the participation. I appreciated that. Okay. Finally, we're getting to the opportunities. You guys see how this is becoming kind of a happier ending? Like we're getting to the crescendo, things are turning a little bit happier here. So what is Gen Z facing? They're facing a lack of purpose, a lack of community, a lack of inspiration, a lack of leadership, Christian and otherwise, and a lack of convicted leadership. These are the gaps. Now, I will say some of these gaps, like convicted leadership, have filled in a little bit, but in my opinion, also in the wrong direction. Amen? This is what the church can do. Lack of purpose, community initiatives, lack of community, family, church family, and mentorship and membership. Lack of inspiration, excellent, stirring, kingdom-centered content that's produced for the pulpit and for the digital pulpit online. A lack of leadership, you have pastors, worship leaders, life group. We are well supplied with leaders in the church, amen? And a lack of convicted leadership, organizations and staff that take a stand on important issues happening in culture are going to prove that you're a pastor of conviction, that you are a worship leader of conviction, that you are a church leader of conviction. Does that make sense? The whole point of this slide is that you can draw a line directly to the solution across from the problem. Does that make sense? Do we have any questions on here? This is a pretty important slide. Pretty clear? Let's keep going. Recommendations. How can we jump in? We can create and administer systems, cultures, protocols that make everyone on staff available as well as productive. This is something I consult on as far as how to do that through the website. We can cultivate a culture of authenticity and invitation. This is a practical piece. I'm not a leadership consultant. I'm not a management consultant. I'm a digital media consultant. But based on some of this research here, you can cultivate a culture of authenticity and invitation, and that's going to do a world of good for your ministry. Number 3, make every effort to invite and encourage others to invite Gen Z personally to church, while at coffee or text message, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook. The channel doesn't matter, who's talking does, and we've talked a lot about that. Is the person that's inviting them to church the person that has also made space for them? Is really the big question. If you make space for somebody and then invite them to church, that will probably convert very quickly. If you sit and you say, first conversation, at the end you're just like, oh, you should come to church. Depending on how the conversation goes, I can't guarantee that that's going to go over well, or that you're even going to win somebody over. Because if you go into it that fast, they're going to think, well, they want to bump their attendance number by 1, which is flattering. And eventually they're going to ask me to give, and I'm not really sold on this person quite yet. So you're asking the right questions too soon. It's not about where you're talking, it's about who's talking. Who's the blog post written by is a big factor in what I do. Again, produce quality content that effectively engages your community and people like them. One of the things that I see so often is the fact that I tell pastors, pastors come to me and they say, we would like to see massive growth for no money on our social media, and we don't want to put any time or effort into this. And I'm just like, we have to put some time and effort into this, and we can get good growth, sticky growth, for no money, but it's not going to be like thousands overnight. You're not going to become a mega church. However, if you create content that engages your community, eventually your community is going to share that with people that they think that content's going to be helpful for. And you're going to start attracting people that look like your community into church, people that rhyme with your community. So you're going to grow kind of the base of people that would have a consensus with you by doing that. Just by by the fact of, hey, so Jimmy, who goes to First Baptist, read this blog post and shared it with Johnny. Johnny's not a Christian, but he agrees with everything in that blog post. Jimmy then said, Jimmy and Johnny then have a faith conversation, and Johnny ends up coming to church. You didn't have to meet Johnny to make an impact in his life. You just had to talk about something. That's the opportunity here. So here's the availability piece. I'm just going to go into these details a little bit more. We need to create and administer a system like scheduling links, like making sure that people have like a scheduling link where they can jump in. This is what I would do. These are hot takes. Some churches like this. Other churches are like, I don't want to be that available, and that's fine. This is just what I would do. So scheduling links where people can connect. You can set availability to maybe like 1 or 2 hours a week at a certain time and watch those book up. Personally reply to as many emails as possible. I mentioned that before. On your personal social media presence, as a pastor, go public. Reply to every comment. Invite people into your lives, and maybe they'll also reciprocate that as well. Finally, so then we have invitation. Make every effort to invite and encourage others to invite Gen Z. Channel doesn't matter, who's talking does. The most important sustainable growth is going to happen with people outside of the church. That's where the biggest opportunity is. We all know this. Equip the church to go out and invite them. That's how you do that. We can do that through the website, but there's also practical things that I'm frankly not qualified to speak on, but you can do that. You know the tools at your disposal as a pastor. Quality content. Every church needs to do sermon recap posts. This is the base of a healthy ecosystem. Take cues from churches with bigger presence, but adapt best practices to your community. So if you see hey, Elevation Church is doing XYZ, or, Long Hollow Baptist is doing XYZ, take some cues from them, but also know it's they're doing this, but that might only work for bigger churches. What does that look? What's appropriate for a church that might not be as big as Long Hollow? Start a blog, like I said. Sermons. These are actually pretty important. Sermons, leadership updates, pastoral commentary, and stories. And so the next slide you're going to appreciate. This is my quick calendar for what blogging you need to do on a regular basis. Sermons, every week. Post your manuscript, put the video over the top of it, done. Stories and commentary. Rotate between these two, but always have one that goes out at least every week. Leadership updates. You should have 5 a year. January, April, July, October, and December. Quarterly, and then in January, on January 1st, it's the year in review. Super easy. Resources. You can do an events guide, ministry guides, devotionals, and Bible reading plans. That whole resources bit, you'd be surprised how much engagement you get on a recurring basis, and what that does for your SEO is just bananas good. In short, Generation Z wants messaging that is quick, authentic, full of conviction, that speaks to the cultural moment. They are looking for guidance, and we can give it to them. They are a visual generation that grew up on the internet. Meet them where they are with high-quality video and photo content that inspires and educates them while corresponding in person. While millennials were driven by experience, like we talked about today, Gen Z is driven by the results that they see in their own lives. So if they can measure it and say this church is making an impact, you're already 75% of the way there as far as winning them over, not only to your church, but also for the gospel on a broader note. Gen Z wants to know where they can produce results in your church through the initiatives that you offer for the sake of benefiting the community around them. It may not be a gospel motivation up front, but it will become that. They're community-oriented first. Lastly, Gen Z is outside the church and is dying to be invited. Empower your community to invite their friends to church for the first time in person and online. Okay, we have one little extra part that we're going to go here. Do we have any questions on Gen Z real quick? Okay. I'm going to take a quick water break. Does anyone else want to take a sip real fast?
Where's the restroom?
Right here.
Around the corner. Is it okay if I catch my breath for a minute? We all drank from the fire hose right there. I love this presentation, but man, it's a lot.
I really like the authenticity of it.
Yeah.
So we talked about experience with specifically with millennials, and I think that a lot of the times with Gen Z, that kind of is a little bit of a contrast. But Gen Z also, when they visit for the first time, they want to have a good experience.
They do, but experience is more driven by how they interact with people.
Yes. As
opposed to where millennials, it's more about, it's like, is your branding nice? Is your building nice? I
think that when one of my friends is a missionary in the UK,
yeah,
and they don't have a church plant. They literally have house churches.
Yeah,
and the way that he meets students and stuff like that is coffee. Goes to sporting events with them and stuff like that, and they see that authenticity, and then intentionality, and what happens is and so a lot of the times they don't get that practice, they don't get that practical stuff.
They don't get to experience good doctrinal praxis.
Exactly.
Yes. And I think we would all agree that the most intentional and authentic friend each of us in this room have is named Jesus Christ. Right? Whether it's prayer or even if just having an encounter and worship and things like that. So the reason I added this in is not just only because it's a lot of other great data, but it's also because a lot of what we've already talked about with Gen Z applies to De-Churched America. And when I read the book The Great De-Churching by Jim Davis and Michael Graham, I was shocked by how much carried over from the research I'd done with Gen Z. So this is going to be a little bit quicker. I'm going to basically give you the overview of the different types of de-church Christians that they identified. I'm also going to give you the snapshot of kind of what they look like and their willingness to return and what they would return for. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Cool. So these are de-churched Americans. There are cultural Christians, de-churched mainstream evangelicals, ex-evangelicals, de-churched people of color, BIPOC, and then de-churched mainline Protestants and Catholics. Those are the 5 categories that they funnel people into with their research. I see y'all are writing some of this down. Just tell me when you're good.
Just go
Okay.
back over and do the video.
Cool. Cultural Christians are less orthodox. So there's going to be more orthodox, which means they align with predominant amount of our teachings, than less orthodox, meaning they don't align. And they're going to fall into one of these 2 buckets. They are driven by friendships. They are typically considered double-minded by most church people, as they espouse Christian, culturally, Christian stuff, but they don't attend church. Mark 4:7 says, "Other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and, choked the plants, so they did not bear grain." Cultural Christians are choked up by the obligations of life. That's kind of the big diagnostic there. Truthfully, the way I read the data is that cultural Christians are going where they feel they need to be responsible and connected to their communities. So if we can make them feel responsible for their community and connected to their community through the church, we're going to be doing a lot there. That goes back to be the hustle at that point in the rules. They left the church because of lack of substantive teaching and authentic community during their formative years. That was kind of the inciting incident there. But 97% are willing to return if invited by a friend. Does that sound familiar to anybody for the past hour? 97% are willing to return if invited by a friend. This is really great news. You just have people that are not prioritizing church. That's really what they are. But we don't need to condemn them for that. We just need to communicate that they can be responsible and connected to the community through the church. Does that make sense, y'all? Mainstream de-churched evangelicals, they have an incredibly high orthodoxy score, meaning they align with a lot of what most good Christians believe. They're driven by impact. This is the largest group of people in this study that relocated during the pandemic and got used to streaming. So kind of our new couch potato congregants. They left the church because of relocation, COVID-19 digitization, life events, general sense of lack of connection. All of them are willing to return to the church if invited by a friend or pastor, are convicted by God in prayer, or see the church making a real positive impact in their community. Does this sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
This is not Gen Z. This is also like millennials, X, boomers, but they're acting a lot like Gen Z. So the application that we have for the young and for the next generation is the same application that's going to inspire us and inspire the current generation, or the elders, the adults in the room, so to speak. Does this all make sense? Does anyone have any questions on this? No? Here we go. This is the sad one. Ex-evangelicals. They're the second most orthodox group of de-church peoples, which means we would agree with most of their beliefs on Christianity. They're driven by political independence and finding common ground. They left because of intense church hurt and a lack of acceptance from different congregations. So, there's that whole time when we really bagged on people for church hopping. These were the people that church hopped and failed, so to speak. They couldn't find their people. They currently see the church and other institutions as a dead end. So they really don't want to connect with anything that's over-institutionalized. 0% are willing to return to the church per the book survey sample, which is really sad. Which is really, really sad. We have to grapple with that. But they did give some clues as to what would bring them back. They say they want a nonpartisan church that preaches and practices consistent Christian ethics. They have pastors that know their limits and know when to ask for help from other professionals. Mental health issues are really what they emphasize in that. And then they also want to see a church that practices what they preach on Sundays. That's what they can't comprehend. They don't see a church that is practicing what's preaching. And until they see a church that's nonpartisan, humble, and practical, they aren't willing to come back. Those are the conversation starters for them, which in my opinion suggests, oh, did something just jump off? Is this still on? Oh, they changed screens. So now you see my stuff on my end. Give me a second here. I don't know why that did that. That's weird. See, I'm a tech guy, and tech doesn't like me all the time either. So let's just do this. Oh, I think I know what I did. Hold on. Where's the mouse? There it is. Can someone tell me when it is? Just over the little SWAT icon. Oh, there it is. Oh.
Click on.
Ooh. There it is. Cool, there we go. Ex-evangelicals, does that make sense? Those are the points that we need to emphasize there. And I personally think that is we may need to even look at the praxis. This is what Mark and you and I were talking about this. Like the practical way we do church may need to change to accommodate this particular group. So BIPOC D Church, real quick, they are the second least Orthodox group surveyed. They are driven by the tension of their identities as a minority, American citizen, and a person of faith and friendships. So they have this thing called a triple identity. The book goes into that in great detail. They also are the most informed demographic. They have a high volume of diverse media consumption tendencies. Left, because of a lack of feeling accepted by the broader church community, there's some church hurt, and there's also a lot of intense family dynamics that came up a lot in that survey. They think faith doesn't work for them, and it's not worth the investment. That was a common thing that came up between everything for this particular thing. 65% are willing to return to the church. They would want to return to a church so that they can make new friends and end their loneliness. They want a church that listens, is open to discussion about theological topics, treating differing views with grace, not hostility, and is nonpartisan, less political. So the depoliticization of the pulpit is also a huge point that we need to bring into view as far as de-churched America. I don't know how you guys all preach, but across the board, it says that the less we talk about politics and espouse politics from the pulpit, that's actually going to make the tent bigger, instead of smaller. Mainline Catholic and de-churched, those with a lower view of Scripture scored lowest on what they would believe in common with most Christians. Those with a high view of Scripture have a similar orthodoxy level to BIPOC, so relatively low on both ends. They're driven by potential impact. They left because of a relocation or conviction that the church is not worth the investment. They're generally willing to return, per my reading of the book's data. That was kind of a murky fact there. But they want a church that focuses on strategic, community, intellectual, and social engagement and makes a real impact. So having like a debate or a forum, a potluck, and then having missions initiatives that are helping the poor, things like that. That's what's going to talk to them. They're very praxis-driven, if that makes any sense. Key takeaways, my version of this. De-church people are lonely due to relocation, church hurt, and a lack of feeling accepted or equipped by the church. De-church population invites us as the church to become what God has always called it to be, a place where people can be seen, heard, understood, loved, and equipped to make a gospel impact in their community. That's what Gen Z and de-church populations are inviting us to do. Whether they know it or not, that's what they're doing. Despite the range in political views and orthodoxy, most de-church Christians want to see a church that's more committed to Christian ethics and teaching than political preferences, while making a strategic gospel impact in their communities. this is a lot to take in, but it doesn't seem too hard to implement. Am I right? This seems pretty practical, some easy ways forward. We're going to have to navigate it together as not just, local churches, but also as the national church and the national conversation, the national cooperation of believers. But there, this research, stirred a lot of people, made people very sad, but also gave a lot of pastors with a more strategic bent a lot of hope, being like, okay, we know what the problem is and we know how to win them back. Are we actually going to take action with this is the main thing. Today's sources are as follows. If you want to take a picture of this slide, I would highly encourage it. But Barna's Gen Z books were incredibly helpful. Meet Generation Z was a book I quoted earlier in this presentation. The Great De-Churching was what I just summarized for y'all in the last couple of slides. And then I have to just give my biggest recommendation to Instabrain. If you want to know Gen Z inside and out, that book, hands down. I mean, I brought my copy with me today in case we had any really specific questions. But, I had marked that thing up like crazy.
So, especially the slide before the last one, one thing that I'm also concerned with is in the last few years we've had a really big rise of deconstruction. And that's not just with the church, that's with as an individual.
Yeah.
Their faith, their personal, talk about being lonely, when they're beginning to question their faith. And not only just question it, we're past questioning it, now we're deconstructing it and bringing it down to where we no longer believe what we've always believed.
Right. My volley back to you on that is I think deconstruction and kind of going through the faith piece by piece is a healthy process. Absolutely. It's what we do in apologetics. The thing that most people don't know that they need help with is reconstruction.
Correct.
And so this is what I think the opportunity is. If the way I see it is that if a pastor is able to hold space in a magnificent way for somebody who's deconstructing, not trying to win arguments, but it's just like, hey, I want to just sit and just hear you think out loud for a little bit. If you do that and you go all the way down the rabbit hole with them, they are probably, when they're at the bottom of that rabbit hole, there's going to probably be a moment at the bottom there where they're going to be like, so what do you think? You have another little wild conversation? And if you do that well enough, I would, at least for me in my experience and my story when I deconstructed, there were people in my life that followed me down the rabbit hole, and when I said, hey, can we go back up the rabbit hole again, they helped me reconstruct in a really positive, constructive way. I would not be the Christian I am today without those people and without that process. So that's a little bit more about my story as well. Do we have any last minute questions here? We had a really great discussion. This was a lot of fun. I'm not even kidding. Like, we've gone for like an hour and 15, and it had, like, I'm just going full nerd mode, and I'm pumped. And you guys have been incredibly engaging and fun, so this has been a joy. What other questions you got?
Is there a book, not just on Gen Z, but on the next generation?
On Gen Alpha?
I think everybody.
They're over.
Yes.
Is that the next one?
Yeah, we are. So that research. So let's see here. James Emery White came out with Meet Gen Z in 2018, which was 5 years after Gen Z, stopped being born, and we were already in Gen Alpha. So I would expect some of the initial research that's going to be church-driven is going to come out around that same time. So if we have 1990 to 2012, that's like a 15-year gap. So, you got so 2012 plus 15, that's...
It says 2025 is Gen Alpha.
Is when they're going to end?
Yeah.
So then probably around 2025 to 2030 is when we're going to start seeing the initial data on that. So as of right now, the focus for the church should be on Gen Z still because they're currently entering the workforce. This is where the college ministries and the young adults and the young professional ministries are underserviced, undersupplied, and need to have an intense focus if the church has any hope of reaching the current generation.
I took a class in school, a conference in New Orleans at the seminary, and one of the things that the professor said, from the ages of 18 to 30 is when you have the most opportunity to reach somebody with the gospel.
Yeah.
After 30 years old, the percentage goes down at least to
Yeah.
50 to 60%. It's absolutely incredible. So
I mean, this research is gonna start being irrelevant in about 4 years. When my generation, when I turn 30, around that time, and we're gonna have to start. I'm gonna have to do all my reading all over again for this Gen Alpha thing and see how messed up they are, if they're more or if they're less messed up.
Wow, that's encouraging.
No, I mean, all of us are messed up. It's just a matter of how much.
Well, back to what Adam just said, we used to be able to think, okay, well, teens leaving the church. Like when I was a teenager, teens leaving the church.
Yeah, we've all
You
been
see them back when they started having kids, and they start bringing their kids to church.
right.
But these, Generation Z and Gen Alpha, how many of them are actually going to be having kids? And when are they having kids? They're having kids a lot later.
They're having kids a lot later. They'll be past 30. They
Right.
also, there's a lot of, and this is a whole other detail, but there's just not a lot of optimism for long-term companionship within Gen Z. Doesn't matter if it's heterosexual, homosexual, just in general. It's just there's not a lot of optimism for that. And so the idea of them actually forming families and coming back is not a trend I would rely on unless we see a abrupt cultural shift, something in that generation, like something as profound as like an Asbury moment, but for, like a marriage movement, which I don't think is going to, frankly, happen with them at this moment, not in the current state, as of today.
Celebrating divorce right now.
Yeah. Oh, if you see all the divorce statistics, it's just depressing. But anyway, that's a great point. So we can't really rely on the fact that they're going to be coming back with their kids because they're having kids later. And I would even go back to Adam's brilliant point that he brought up, the idea it's like, once they become 30, our opportunities diminish significantly. And so if they're turning 30 before they're having kids, that's not just a huge liability for Gen Z, that's a huge liability for the next generation as well. We're going to be starting another step back. So that's just another piece.
I think that also some of the youth that I've worked with as an intern, one of them, she just graduated high school and actually already married.
Yeah, and you have
And
the
so-
exceptions like that as well.
And so, of course, she was also homeschooled her whole life.
No, that'll do it.
And so, but
I love my homeschool friends. Don't take that the wrong way. You just got to know consumer behavior. So to speak.
But I think a lot of that came up with was that her upbringing was centered around Christ the whole time.
Yeah.
And so with that, and being even in a Christian academy, she had those things. She was taught those things on a continual basis.
Yeah.
And then another one of them, she's now a worship leader at a church in Kentucky.
Yeah.
And she's married and is pregnant with her first child. And so I think one of the things with it is a lot of the times with people that lead in church, discipleship hasn't happened where we wanted to get them in the door, but the reason why they're leaving is because they've had no teaching.
Yeah, and I think teaching is a part of it, but I think praxis is the first part.
Yeah.
Because if we don't practice what we preach, what's the point in anyone listening to us in the first place?
Yeah.
If we say Jesus loves you, but we aren't willing to hold space for the massive ways the current culture disagrees with us, the same way that Jesus holds space for us when we massively disagree with him, if we don't mirror that in his character to the culture, we start with a foot back and, I don't know, at a disadvantage, so to speak. And so I think, to your point, there's a lot to be said about Christian community, Christian upbringing, and retention from that, which is important. Kids ministries, invest in those. However, if we're talking about broader outreach, which is what this presentation really focuses on, people on the outside, we need to assume that that is very much not their context, and quite frankly, is quite the opposite of their context. Yeah. Which is just me. Great point, but in the context of what I'm presenting here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just it's extremely difficult with it because with those that are leaving the church and those that don't even want to come back to the church.
Yeah.
How do you reach them?
Well,
Like, it's,
I mean, they will know we are Christians by our love.
Exactly. And so, Romans 12:9, let love be genuine, abhor what is evil, hold fast to what is good.
Great quote.
And so, if we're not genuine, if we're not sincere,
If we're not authentic.
If we're not authentic, they're not going to see us. And so, and I think that's one of the things is that the church today is that they want authenticity for socialism. Well, like not literally socialism, but like, no, but the social experience.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah.
but really it's like, they will know you're Christians by our love. It's like, if faith without deeds is dead. It's like, if we don't practice what we preach, if we do not have a consistent Christian social ethic that extends from belief all the way through to practice, what is the point? So, yes, sir.
My takeaway from this whole thing is, okay, yes, we probably, I'm not the only one here to say, I've failed in this, even with my kids. I've spoken to them as my sons, but I've ever spoken to them in their generation. And what I've seen is, yes, they want authentic, they want real, but really in real life, we're broken.
Yeah.
We're going to fail. But what I see is that they still have a sense of grace that they are forgiving, if you're willing to step up and to change. Hey, if you've been doing it and it wasn't working, we'll stop doing that. Obviously, it's not working. You go away that's actually going to work, and that they're going to be gracious enough to let you and still pick up the pieces and still listen.
And I would encourage you on that point from my experience. So how we talked about the whole social liberal thing. I can be a little bit more right-leaning, political person, Christian, all that other stuff, and I can be friends with somebody who is a bisexual lesbian in Los Angeles.
Correct.
That dynamic, as unlikely and as stark as that seems, is very familiar, and I think if Christians adopt, I believe this is my optimism in Gen Z. It may not be true, but this is my optimism. It's that if we approach within the same posture of, we don't agree, but you're human and I love you.
Yeah.
We don't have to necessarily say what's motivating that right off the bat, because that's how they talk. You're human, I love you, I don't care how you do that. That's their hedonism. But for us, it's just like, you're human and I love you. If we do that, and we do that really well, better than anyone else, they're going to start asking, are you approaching that statement a little differently? And that's where we're off to the races.
Yeah.
This has been great. Do you guys want to have a couple follow-up? Let's do a couple follow-up pieces here real quick. So, thank you for that. So this is where I'm going to be posting the presentation, the slides. I'll be giving, we'll hand that piece of video off a little bit, but I'm also going to be doing my own recording with a little bit better audio. But Good Grain University is a resource that I'm updating on a quarterly basis, and it's going to be having different e-courses based on like Communications 101, so like how to think about communicating online, as well as other courses and detailed like how-to videos and stuff like that. The first year is free. After that, it's $60 a year, which if you go and do the math on it, it's about $1 a week. I really wanted to be able to equip the church in a way that was powerful, shared what I know in a practical way, but also paid for the fact that I have some infrastructure hosting costs to account for as a business as well. So that's that.